Hello, good morning. Welcome to Gaming Inside Daily for Tuesday, August 5th, 2025. I'm Steve Saylor. This is your sometimes daily show of gaming news, accessibility news, or updates about my life. I have coffee in my tea Earl Grey hot mug today, my Star Trek mug. Hope you had a good weekend. It was a long weekend for me, but yeah, it's sort of ish in a way. I basically had spent some time with the family over the weekend, but then also kind of it wasn't really a long weekend specifically because I was home streaming yesterday. So if you watch sort of me learn how to be able to build a commander deck and Magic the Gathering on stream, thank you for coming out. I appreciate it. But yeah, I wanted to take a break from at least a one-day break, kind of try to be able to sleep in on Monday, which I did, which was great. So basically, yeah, I had a really great long weekend, spent it with family, friends, and all that, and it was awesome. So today is sort of a part two to my video from on Friday, where I talked about Silent Hill F. And the comment that one of the producers said that due to the popularity of Soulslike games or challenging combat, they've increased the challenge or the difficulty of combat in Silent Hill F. And I discussed that along with accessibility and how easy mode or difficulty modes don't fix necessarily the issue, the main reason why basically they don't fix like a Souls-like game. We've always kind of said that, and it's generally been, like I said, like people who think that accessibility is just an easy mode are missing the entire reason why accessibility needs to happen or needs to be in games. It's beyond just an easy mode. It's beyond just difficulty options. And so we talked about that. I talked about a little bit more of the kind of ins and outs of Souls-like games versus difficult combat and stuff like that. And then this article came up from IGN that kind of sort of in a way says the exact same thing that I've been saying about accessibility difficulty modes, but people have been saying about Souls-like games. And I wanted to kind of give that contrast and maybe tie everything all together today. This is not a I told you so or now you know how it feels type video, but the conversations are going to be kind of similar in that sort of vein, but I'm not necessarily calling people out to be like, now you know how it feels, blah, 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 kind of deal. I may get into that point if I get into a rant, but anyway. So let's jump into the news story. This is from Vicky Blake over at IGN, and also I'm so sorry for those who got laid off yesterday from IGN. It's ridiculous how small, like the smaller and smaller IGN is getting. There is not many people that are left there, and it's become almost a skeleton crew, and I'm sad to see it kind of go this way. I hope that folks at IGN are able to thrive and flourish, but Matt Kim, who we've read articles on this show before, unfortunately was one of the people who got let go. They let go 8 people, but and you think, oh, 8 people is not that much, but Matt was definitely a big kind of obviously a writer for IGN. Apparently the social media guy for IGN is now the only one in LA currently right now. Anyway, it's terrible what Ziv Davis has been doing to IGN, corporate overlord bullshit. So I'm sorry to them, and I'm only reading this story because this is relevant to what we've been talking about. It's not to say I'm going to boycott IGN from here on out, because the people who are there still need to be able to have their work seen. But it is still like I'm still pissed off that this is what IGN has become. Anyway, let's jump into the news story. Nobody knows what a Souls-like is. Silent Hill, quote, nobody knows what a Souls-like is, end quote. Silent Hill F sparks heated debate within the fandom. Quote, this whole situation feels like Silent Hill 2 remake all over again with almost the same talking points, end quote. As Silent Hill F pours over the slew of Silent Hill F fans pour over the slew of previews that went live recently. You can read ours right here. We talked about that. We actually did use the IGN video preview of Silent Hill F on the previous episode. Two questions are constantly popping up on social media and fan communities. Is the latest mainline Silent Hill really a quote-unquote Souls-like game? And if it is, what does the term Souls-like ever mean anyway? As we described in IGN Silent Hill F hands-on preview, combat itself has a similar feel to Silent Hill 2's remakes. Silent Hill 2 remakes close-range combat. You can dodge enemy attacks with a dual-sense circle button and activate a light and heavy attack with R1 and R2, respectively. Your limited reach and lengthy attack motions give a realistic, weighty feel to combat. Heavy attacks especially feel slow and need to be timed well, contributing to the feeling that Hiniko is just a teenager with limited strength. On top of that, however, Silent Hill F's combat also features timed dodges and counterattacks, with the latter particularly important in combat sequences. Enemies briefly show a sign when a counterattack can be utilized, but we suggested that unless you have trained your reflex skills by playing games like Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, you will likely have a hard time reacting. That's where the focus mode comes in, which can be triggered by holding L2. It also counterattacks to last longer, while also charging up a power attack that staggers an enemy. While series producer Motoi Okamoto hasn't specifically mentioned the Souls-like genre, and by our estimation Silent Hill F is by no means a Souls-like, talk of parries and counterattacks can't come as quite the surprise to Silent Hill fans. The franchise has never been famous for its clunky combat. Story and atmosphere have always come first. But Okotomo's suggestion that F's combat sequence had been ratcheted up because, quote, challenging action games are gaining popularity among younger players nowadays, end quote, has pretty much split the fandom. This legacy of From Software's Souls series isn't just defined by the amazing games in its back catalog, but also the subgenre that's been given life thanks to its very existence. The Souls-like, while defining... Let me read that sentence again. The legacy of From Software's Souls series isn't just defined by the amazing games in its back catalog, but also the subgenre that's been given life thanks to its very existence, the Souls-like. While defining one is kind of tricky, there are core elements that tend to apply to Souls games, such as punishing consequences for death, souls, or similar currency gained by defeating enemies that is integral to character progression and can be lost upon death, methodical combat, typically tied to a stamina meter, and checkpoints that reset the world. For some, however, Souls-like can simply mean tough melee combat that involves learning to predict an enemy's attack pattern. In a thread entitled Silent Hill F is not Souls-like and no one seems to know what that means, a Redditor said, genuinely baffling. This is Link... I don't know, bad grammar, I think. This is second graders being told to name an object and call... This is like second graders being told to name an object and call a toaster a blender. Like, I don't think you even know what a Souls-like is. Having a dodge roll and hard bosses applies to like 90% of third-party games that exist, lol. Like, you people cannot be serious. Souls games have heavy and light attack, tight-knit dodge-intensive combat. You have frame-perfect dodges, a huge emphasis on stamina management, with shields, break meters, and focus on killing enemies to get currency. Silent F has 1.5 of those. The blatant lie needs to stop. Anyone with eyes who isn't full of shit can see this is nothing like a Souls-like. Okay, I'm not going to comment on anyone with eyes. And I think you can get the joke in there. It's the broader confusion between what and what is not indicative of a Souls-like game that's frustrating players, though. To be fair, quote, nobody knows what a Souls-like game is, end quote, admitted a respondent. This is clearly demonstrated on the Souls-like sub daily arguments about whether or not a game is a Souls-like. I've sunk hundreds of hours into From Software's games and Souls-like games like Nioh, said someone else. Nothing but Silent Hill F looks like a Souls-like, other than there's a target lock on system and a stamina meter, which is in, a million other games that are not goddamn Souls-likes. Confusingly, others have also played Souls-inspired games don't concur, however, leading to considerable disagreement to what does and does not make a Souls-like game. Is it the melee combat, the need to parry, or does any game that requires players to learn an enemy's attack pattern count? I'm still excited for the game, but the comparisons to Souls combat are really clear, guys. Like, come on, posted one. Invincible dodge, lock-on system, light and heavy attacks, multiple temp boss fights, testing your combat prowess. Even the combat UI is clearly inspired by action games. People complain about the combat becoming melee focused, like they don't remember Silent Hill 4. Breakable weapons are essential without the firearms if we still want the game to stay a survival horror, explained another fan. This whole situation feels like Silent Hill 2 Remake all over again with almost the same talking points. Okotomo said the tougher combat with the visuals and music is juxtaposition between beauty and terror, along with the terrible beauty of the game's monster design, makes for a terrifying adventure. Even the puzzles are apparently grounded in psychological anguish and suffering. Quite how players react to all that when Silent Hill F finally releases next month, of course, remains to be seen. Okay, so I've read all that, and here are my thoughts. Again, we're all asking for the same thing, or we're all talking about the same thing. There is nuance to every single bit of this argument here. Seeing from the Souls-like perspective, I've mentioned this in the previous video, but a Souls-like is more like a combat puzzle. Okay, there is the traditional combat that you see in action games. That is what generally a lot of people are saying that are like when you look at games and they have this particular combat style, they can be described as Souls-like in a way. But the combat is you have perfect dodges, you have perfect parries, or you have counterattacks, like you have difficult, like challenging bosses with more health points, blah blah blah. That's the combat side of things. Then the puzzle aspect comes in, where it's learning the patterns and the weaknesses of a boss. And sometimes you have to learn those sequences by dying multiple times so that you can get the timing right for those perfect dodges and all that stuff. And it could be argued that generally a lot of combat action games are the same thing. But oftentimes in combat action games, those perfect dodges, perfect parries, blah, 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 when you're going up against a boss, you could generally kind of overwhelm a boss by just basically just hit, like, in a way, it's not necessarily button mashing, but it kind of is in a similar effect. Like you can basically interrupt a boss's attack. You can take advantage of stuff. You have heavier power weapons or abilities to be able to overpower them. So there's not really a huge. There may be a little bit of a pattern that you need to learn here and there of like, okay, when this enemy does this, I need to be able to be prepared for this, and that's why you have like sometimes enemies that basically have attacks that are not like you can't dodge, so you have to parry or sorry. You can't parry, but you have to dodge out of the way, that kind of thing. But for the most part, a lot of combat action games are designed on the combat system and not necessarily on the bosses that are the puzzle aspect. And I think that is where, from evaluating a lot of Souls-like games and being in this discourse for years now, I think, like I've always said, that there is a genius level to a Souls-like game or a Souls game, especially ones from Software. And a lot of times it is that second half, which is the puzzle aspect of a boss. You need to learn their patterns. You need to find that right moment when a counterattack can work, or a dodge, or a parry, or even just what the different stages or phases of a boss, because you need to learn, okay, how much health potions do I need in order to be able to get to this phase, so that I can be able to last until the end. There's a lot of that strategy going on when you're learning how to be able to beat a Souls or a Souls-like boss. Essentially, all of that combined can create a Souls-like game. But the common perception, or what is it? Maybe did I get that wrong? The common Anyway, the common thing that is missed, or the common thing that is said about Souls-like games, is just challenging combat. And a lot of Souls-like fans are saying that's not the case. There is a lot more to a Souls-like than just difficult combat. And it's the same thing about accessibility. Accessibility is more than just an easy mode. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more additional to it. So by people saying that that like by complaining about the fans or the discourse right now that of Silent Hill F being a Souls-like. A lot of the Souls-like fans are feeling a similar thing to what disabled players have been saying about accessibility. Is that Souls-like that comment from that run Redditor is right. A Souls-like has multiple different things, and Silent Hill F has like 1.5 of that. Same thing with accessibility. Yes, difficulty modes can be part of accessibility, but there's a lot more to be able to be said about to be included in accessibility, where difficulty modes is like 1.5 of that. And I give this perspective of a Souls-like because I get it. I want to play a Souls-like game. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, it's challenging, but I want to also have fun when I'm playing these games. And if there's accessibility in these games, then it means I could be able to play it. I know that Silent Hill 2 isn't necessarily a Souls-like, but because the accessibility that was built into that game, I was actually able to play it for the first time and complete it and roll credits. I want to do the same thing with other Souls-like games. And here's the thing too, I'll even say this. A lot of people say that, and I've even potentially even said this in the past too, that Elden Ring or like Demon Souls or Dark Souls, what have you, are inaccessible. They're completely inaccessible, fully inaccessible. And I may have made that argument once or twice here and there, but I have to basically admit when I was wrong. And I was only wrong in regards to motor disabled players, because a lot of these games have the ability to be able to at least remap controls. A lot of motor disabled players have been able to play these games and enjoy it. And you may, if you're like, well, who's been able to play these? Who's a motor disabled person who's been able to play these? Well, my friend Grant, for one, he loves Elden Ring, absolutely adores it. Also another one of my friend who's deaf and hard of hearing, but is able to play is able to enjoy Elden Ring specifically. But even just beyond the disability community, have you ever seen a streamer play or beat Elden Ring on a different controller, like a DDR dance pad or steering wheels or Donkey Kong bongo drums, or even potatoes, like my friend Thormagander does? Shout out to Thormagander, who's on Twitch. They do that they do that all the time. They've literally played Elden Ring, Dark Souls on a steering wheel, Donkey Kong bongos, and potatoes because of the ability to be able to remap controls. And you may be wondering, well, wait, how does that sort of tie into accessibility? If you think about it, those are what we call alternative controllers, which essentially is what adaptive controllers are. They're alternate controllers that essentially allow a disabled player specifically to be able to play. Because oftentimes, all you really need is an input-output signal for a button. And oftentimes, that could basically be done via a headphone cable. Because that's all that signal that's all the signal that is needed. A 3.5 millimeter jack can be able to send an input and output. All it is just an on off, and a button will be anything can be programmed as a button. That's why DDR dance pads work. That's why creating electrical signals on potatoes can work, because all it needs is just is an on off, and that's like an on off sort of input output, and that can be used as a controller for an Elden Ring or for Dark Souls. And it works. And because the game allows you to do that, essentially, like, you have to do a little bit of hacking in order to be able to make it work. You have to have software to kind of allow the alternative controls to be able to have these inputs to translate to specific button presses that are within the game. However, that same technology that people are using to create these alternative controllers is the same technology that's being used to create adaptive controllers for those with motor disabilities. That's why, hold on, let me grab it. Hold on, I'm gonna grab it here. That's why the Xbox adaptive controller, which I have here, has every single input for an Xbox controller. These are literally headphone jacks. Okay, these are literally headphone jacks, and as soon as you plug in a headphone cable into this, and it's attached to a working like button, switch, toggle, what have you, that translates to a signal to basically say, okay, this is now an X button, this is now the Y button, or what have you. And the same technology is being used for these adaptive controllers, or alternate controllers for playing these like kind of challenges for these types of games, is the same thing for adaptive controllers for accessibility. So yes, Souls-like games can be accessible, generally have been accessible for those with motor disabilities. Not to say it's perfect. There are definitely things that can be changed. There are definitely things that can be because here's the thing, it's not, they weren't designed to be accessible for specifically motor disabled players. It was just that's how the Souls-like fans like it, where you can be able to remap controls to whatever works more comfortable for you. So it wasn't designed with accessibility in mind, but in turn, because it allowed an alternative controller format, it became accessible incidentally. And so I would say, if a game wants to be, if a studio wants to make a Souls-like and they want to make it accessible, they can still do so and still keep the challenge and the fun alive that people love about Souls-like games. Again, there are multiple different things that are in a Souls-like game that make it a Souls-like. Much like that, there are multiple things within accessibility that make it an accessible game. And I feel like that we are so close to getting a game that is the perfect marriage of a true Souls-like and accessibility. We're slowly getting there. The Star Wars Jedi series from Respawn have been described as similar to like a Souls-like, but because it also has a bunch of accessibility, actually those games are accessible to a lot of disabled players. Same with Another Crab's Treasure, by including certain things about making it accessible. Game speed is one of them. And I even talked about this in my review for Another Crab's Treasure, and I even did a clip about, there was a separate clip about this where I said that, yeah, okay, I now can be able to play a Souls-like game because, and I've decided that, yeah, maybe Souls-like games are maybe not for me. I would love to be able to be challenged wrong, and I would love to be able to find a Souls-like game that I could actually be able to enjoy and play. But at the time when I played it, I was like, okay, now I realize maybe Souls-like games aren't for me, but only because I was able to try it and basically decide for myself instead of being forced to say that, oh, it's not for me because it doesn't have accessibility, instead of being forced to make that decision. Another Crab's Treasure is, if you have not checked it out, that is a great game that also does have it's very Souls-like in nature, but it does have a decent accessibility, including one of my favorite accessibility features, which is Give Krill a Gun, which literally creates a large handgun on the back of your crab, and it's great. It's by Aggro Crab. Definitely recommend picking it up. They've been a big advocates for accessibility in the space as well, so definitely recommend checking that out. So we are very close to getting a game that can be set as a Souls game that can be accessible. And I can guarantee that if miracle upon miracles, From Software decides to be able to make their games more accessible, that I guarantee there will be consultants who would chomp at the bit to be able to help make that game more accessible. Not to make it easier, but to be able to, because they are wanting to be able to keep the same challenge and the same everything that makes a Souls game, but still make it accessible. I still believe that. I believe with all my heart that is a thing that could that accessibility consultants would love to be able to try to be able to help with, and also that I think that I truly do believe that there will be a Souls game someday that will be accessible will be fully accessible. Like, we'll be able to talk about a game like the same reverence that we had about The Last of Us will be said about a Souls game coming in the future, with it being fully accessible. And again, I know I went on a sort of a different tangent here as well, to kind of off the story itself, but what it really, again, what it, like the TLDR of this video is literally accessibility and Soulslike have a lot more in common than people think. In that what people think, we have a common misconception in the space. People think that Soulslikes is just difficult combat, and people think that accessibility is just easy mode. And both fans are saying, no, that's not the case. That's just only part of it. And I feel like that we could all come together on that. So take that what you will. All right, that's going to be it for today. Again, this may have been just literally repeating what I just said on Friday. I don't know, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Yeah, I think that's going to be kind of it. Take care. Have yourself a great and wonderful day. And I will see you all tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.